Hello everyone, and welcome to my 3.5-hour podcast about how much I want to smash Bugs Bunny. I'm your host, Walter Hartwell White. I live at 308 Negra Arroyo Lane, Albuquerque, New Mexico, 87. In my FNAF tier list video, I put Sister Location in a B for horror. Personally, I agree with that grading. However, I did not discuss how Sister Location's horror does differ from previous games. From the start, Sister Location has a similarly unsettling feeling as the opening of FNAF 4, and to some extent FNAF 2, but Sister Location has an obvious and major step up in quality from previous games. FNAF 4 kind of just loads in, doesn't really have anything fancy. It has some creepy music, and the title screen is pretty unsettling, but it's not that interesting. But then Sister Location opens up with a major lore drop and a very unsettling, voice-acted cutscene, hinting at the fact that William Afton, who, if you read the books, you know is the purple guy, was designing the animatronics to lure and capture children, before going to the title screen.
There's no doubting what you've achieved on a technical level. These are clearly state-of-the-art. There are just certain design choices that were made for these robots that we don't fully understand. We were hoping that you could shed some light on those.
She can dance. She can sing. She's equipped with a built-in helium tank for inflating balloons right at her fingertips. She can take song requests. She can even dispense ice cream.
With all due respect, those aren't the design choices we were curious about, Mr. Afton.
Parts of what I like about Sister Location's style of horror is that it mixes in jokes and such with the scary parts of the game. An example would be when the angsty teen voice malfunctions in Night 2. The angsty teen voice is quite obviously a joke, and you aren't expecting Scott to keep using it throughout the game, but it's still very disturbing expecting a funny voice, and then you hear this unintelligible, distorted voice. Great. Before the default voice informs you why the voice stopped working. Although this is a good example of switching between humor and horror, some of the more unsettling cases of Sister Location using this is when it goes straight from crawling through a vent at the end of Night 1 and hearing violent, presumably animatronic originating footsteps above you to a Charlie jingle in another Immortal and the Restless episode. In my Subnautica video, I mentioned the differences between horror and terror, and while generally FNAF tends to focus on horror, I do think Sister Location adds aspects of terror and leans into the horror that makes it so scary. Example of Sister Location causing anywhere from discomfort at a situation to extreme terror is when you return from the breaker room on Night 2, and you hear Ballora say in a soft-spoken tone, and even though, to my knowledge, you can't get jump scared during that segment, it's still absolutely terrifying. But when you first enter the Ballora gallery and travel towards the breaker room, you experience one case of Sister Location leaning into horror. And it is when Hand Unit interrupts the silence, occasional music, and pitter-pattering of you crawling through the room with this.
It seems you are taking a long time. Please proceed as quickly and as quietly as possible.
In my opinion, one of the scariest moments in all of FNAF is on Night 2. It's built up by knowing that the motion triggers happen at certain points in the vents. While you're in your office, you start to hear motion triggers for entry vents.
Motion trigger, entryway vent.
The opening of the Funtime Auditorium and Ballora Gallery vents.
Funtime Auditorium maintenance vent opened. Ballora Gallery maintenance vent opened.
And then you hear Baby's voice.
I don't recognize you. You are new. I remember this scenario, however.
Trying to help you. A twist hero and also a twist villain later on, but that's different. There's a lot of unsettling moments in Sister Location, but I think one of the most disturbing is when Baby describes to you how she scooped Elizabeth Afton into her stomach and killed her. and how other children couldn't even hear her screaming. It's absolutely terrifying, and it confirms the vague hint from the opening cutscene that the animatronics are designed to lure and kill children. It's only accessible by going to the basement for baby's room. At that night, you are specifically told by Hand Unit not to go in that room, which makes it all the more unsettling when you expect to just die and instead hear a disturbing description of a young girl being killed. Another one that was very unsettling when I first saw it is the non-canon ending after surviving the night in the private room. You get rescued and fired, and you expect a normal episode with the Immortal and the Restless, and at first you'd be right to, but at a certain point you hear metal scraping, and you look over to your right. And Ennard has followed you home, and presumably kills you. Sister Location has a clear influence on Pizza Sim, which could probably have its own video, but it is pretty clear that Scott took notes from what was good about Sister Location and what people didn't like about it. People didn't like the lack of replayability and the fact that all but one of the nights are way too easy, and that one of them is pretty much impossible to beat without dying a few times at least. The parts and service section in Help Wanted and even the salvage section in Pizza Sim both seem very derived from the repair sections in Sister Location, but what is more relevant to this video is how its horror changes from Sister Location and the aspects that don't. The salvage section seems to serve the purpose of building on what Scott did with Sister Location's repair segments. It takes the idea of sitting in front of an animatronic and needing to complete specific tasks and makes it even more terrifying with the fact that the animatronic may or may not be deactivated, and that they're just generally a lot more unstable. And the general atmosphere is just a lot more scary. The animatronics are more destroyed. The office segment seems to serve more as a return to the more conventional FNAF format, but it relies a bit on more startling jump scares than previous games, which tend to have more build-up and stress before the jump scare, at least in my experience. I can't talk about Pizza Sim without talking about the ending cutscene. It's incredibly unsettling, yet satisfying to finally have a clean ending to the story you've been following for 4 years now, at least at the time of the game coming out. It's a massive lore drop, and right after that incredible cutscene, it does the same thing Sister Location does, where it cuts straight to a lighthearted joke cutscene. It feels so uncomfortable to just have witnessed something so important, and have it just cut to some random bit. I will say, just to end off the video, that I'm not a huge fan of Sister Location's horror. Although parts of it are definitely scarier because of their differences, I'm not a huge fan of. But until next video, I'm both of your parents, and you're gonna have to get a job soon. Get out of my house!